The death of the 6-year-old boy in Nowra has drawn the attention of the nation. In August 1993, a little boy, John Ashfield, aged 6, was beaten to death with a hammer to his head. His mother, Gunn Britt Ashfield, then 25, led the assault. Her boyfriend, Austin Allen Hughes, then 20, was a keen participant. According to evidence presented to the court in December 1993, Ashfield became enraged when she heard that John, who was in year 1 at East Nowra Primary School on the NSW South Coast, inappropriately touched his 3-year-old sister. Her boyfriend agreed the boy could not be allowed to get away with it. Actually, he didn't. Less than 24 hours later, he died in Shoalhaven Hospital, his tiny body covered in more than 100 bruises from his parents' savage beating. A beating that ended with Hughes putting the Nowra telephone book against John's head and hitting him with a hammer. Gunn Britt Ashfield's mother appeared briefly in Parramatta local court, shaking and sobbing as she was charged with her son's murder. Dressed in blue jeans, a green parka, and barefoot, Ms. Ashfield sat in the dock with her head bowed and her long hair covering her face. No plea was entered, nor was bail sought by her solicitor. As a result, she was remanded in custody to appear at local court on Monday, August 1993. In Nowra local court, her fiancé, Austin Hughes, 20, was brought into court under tight security. He was also charged with murdering John Ashfield. Hughes participated in a horrific and systematic beating of the 6-year-old boy over a period of more than 2 hours. The child was flown to Westmead Hospital in Sydney, where he was admitted with critical head injuries, the court heard. He was brain dead on arrival and was placed on a life support system. However, the medical staff switched that off at 6:45 p.m. on Thursday and pronounced him dead. Hughes took part in an electronic interview at Nowra Police Station, where he gave a graphic account of his version of Wednesday's events. Hughes and Ashfield had concocted a story of an assault on their son by 4 juveniles in Nowra's Lyrebird Park to mislead authorities. However, no bail application was made on Hughes' behalf. He was remanded in custody to reappear on Monday. Police said they feared for his safety if bail was granted. John and 4 other children had come to the attention of social workers before he was brought unconscious to the hospital on Wednesday. The other children had since been medically examined because of the injuries doctors found on John's body. He would not reveal details of the examinations, but police said the children ranged from 3 to 8 years old. The department has had previous contact with the family, but I cannot say anymore because of the usual confidentiality issues. They have submitted a care application to the Children's Court regarding the further care of the other 4 children of Ms. Ashfield. Cases like this are very tragic. There is no doubt about that. One can only wonder how they could occur. There were near riot scenes outside the Nowra court as community outrage over the death spilled onto the streets when Hughes appeared. One protester was arrested as police struggled to contain an angry crowd of about 150 people, many of whom hurled abuse and tried to get to Hughes as he was taken to and from the court in a paddy wagon. Residents waving placards and shouting crammed the footpath and spilled onto the road outside the court. Actually, people had gathered from early morning outside the court to catch sight of Mr. Hughes. Less than 24 hours earlier, many had telephoned the police station next door offering support and information. After Hughes and Ms. Ashfield had gone to the nation's media to appeal for help to catch the alleged killers. All protesters feel used and cheated. First they were told one thing, and now another. The head of the Children's Intensive Care Unit at Westmead Hospital in Sydney said the boy's injuries were consistent with being punched and kicked. He said John had bruises on his back, his bottom, his head, and his face. Nowra Mayor, Mr. Max Atkins, said the town was a favored spot for low-income families because of the relative cheapness of beachside rental accommodation. Police looking for John Ashfield's father to inform him officially of his son's death revealed that a warrant had been issued for his arrest. Police said the boy's father, who has not yet been found, was wanted by police concerning a separate matter. They were each sentenced to 21 years in jail, reduced to 19 years on appeal, with a minimum of 14 years. In August 2007, it was 14 years since she beat John to death, changed her name in prison, and now calls herself Angelique Karstrom, who will apply for parole. Hughes has also applied for parole. In 2004, the NSW Parliament passed laws that made it an offense for media outlets to publish the name of a dead child who had been the victim of a crime, no matter what the circumstances. This law prevented the Weekend Australian from printing this story, ostensibly to protect the victim, John. The newspaper's parent company, News Limited, backed by groups including the NSW Homicide Victims Support Group, and the Victims of Crime Assistance League, has lobbied against this law since it was enacted, believing that it protects only the killers from being identified. In September 2007, the NSW Parliament passed a bill amending the law, making publication permissible in some circumstances, such as if the next of kin agree. John's sister Melissa, 17, does not want her mother released. "I have not seen my mother since I was 11, she said. "The last time I saw her, in prison, I pulled her hair and slapped her. I had flashbacks to what happened. She tried to blame me. She tried to get us to help her bash John. She tried to say that John touched me. He never touched me." Melissa says she remembers the day John was beaten, clear as anything. When he swang in from school that day, Hughes confronted him in the kitchen. He told police he kicked John on the bottom with the side of his foot the way you kick a soccer ball, slapped him around the head, and sent him to his room. But that was not the end of it. Ashfield and Hughes decided John needed to be taught a lesson. They went into his bedroom and started beating him. A frenzy soon developed. They punched him with their fists and beat him with a white aluminum rod that held up a curtain. John was sobbing, "I'm really sorry. Don't do this to me. I'm sorry." Hughes mocked him, saying, "You scream like a little girl." When John continued to sob, Hughes took a girl's dress out of the cupboard and shoved it over the crying boy's head, forcing his arms through the sleeves. He started crying and carrying on, Hughes would later say in a police statement. He was crying, get it off, I'm not a girl." Death came slowly. Ashfield would later tell the police that Hughes had put the phone book against John's head and repeatedly beat him with a hammer until John was limp and dazed, unable to sit upon the bed. When it became apparent that John had lost consciousness, his mother dunked him under a cold shower, then a hot shower. Several hours passed before Ashfield took her son to Shoalhaven Hospital. In the meantime, she told her other children to tell police John had been beaten by a gang of teenagers while walking through a park. Her oldest boy, then aged 8, went on national television to back up the story. In a shaky voice, he said, "We were going to buy milk and bread, when 4 boys said, 'Come here. We want to bash you up.'" The story was never going to stack up. John was cold and bleeding from the nostrils when he was airlifted to Westmead Hospital in Sydney. Dr. Barry Wilkins would later tell the court he had more than 100 different colored bruises, suggesting repeated, non-accidental beating at all. His small hands were swollen and bruised, which suggested he had attempted to fend off an assault. He had suffered a severe brain injury. John died the next day, Friday, August 6, 1993. His mother and her boyfriend were charged with murder shortly afterward. At John's funeral, his natural father, Brian Ashfield, wailed over the white coffin. Brian is now dead. But he told reporters at the time of his son's murder that he had warned the NSW Department of Community Services that his wife was violent and that she intended to hurt the children. Since her brother was killed, Melissa's life has been chaotic. She was fostered into the care of DCS after her mother went to prison but ran away at 11. She bounced around foster homes and was briefly placed in a nunnery in Grafton, until she fell pregnant at 16 and lost the baby. She admits to drinking alcohol, doing crazy stuff to deal with anger and grief, but is trying to steady her path. She now lives with her boyfriend, Jason, 33, and is in counseling. John's uncle, Andrew Ashfield, said the law-banning publication of John's story had protected the people who killed him and the social workers who let it happen. DCS knew that she was violent and troubled, but they didn't take the kids until after she killed one of them. Wendy Campbell, who was Brian's fiancée at the time of John's death, wants the case to get media attention because she promised Brian, "If they ever apply for parole, I will be there, and I will stop it." A woman who used a hammer and a telephone book to beat her 6-year-old son to death has been granted parole on the condition she doesn't visit his grave. Britt Gunn Ashfield, 53, now known as Angelica Karstrom, wept during a hearing by the State Parole Authority at Parramatta in Western Sydney. Her daughter Melissa Ashfield, 21, opposed her mother's parole during an emotional witness impact statement she made at the hearing. Her mother was on screen via video link from jail as Melissa yelled at her, "She can rot in hell. The day I'll jump for you is the day you drop dead. And you can go to hell." Annette Ashfield, the sister of Melissa's late father, Brian Ashfield, also took the stand. She calmly stated that she had known Ashfield for 28 years and had visited her former sister-in-law in jail several times. Annette gave an impression she was about to express sorrow for Ashfield. "I want her to stay in jail and die in jail. I want her to go back to her little cell and hang herself or put a bullet in your head." She had served 18 years of her sentence, then applied for parole when the parole authority then indicated it would approve her application. Counsel for the state of NSW, David Kell, opposed her custodial release, saying her crime was heinous and her ability to live in the community lawfully had not been tested. In delivering the authority's determination, Cherry and Pike said the benefits of parole outweighed the need to keep Ashfield in custody. It remains particularly concerned that this is the last opportunity for parole, and it is clearly not in the interest of the public that she ends her sentence without the benefit of a period of parole supervision. The authority is of the view parole should be granted. Annette stood up before he could finish reading the decision and shouted to Ashfield, "See you 6 feet under," and then stormed out of the hearing. Seconds later, Melissa Ashfield stood up, held a photo of John to one of the television monitors, and said, "Have a look at what you did, you mutt." Ashfield had 10 conditions imposed on her parole, including electronic monitoring, drug and alcohol testing, curfews, and ongoing counseling. She is banned from living or visiting the Illawarra and Hunter regions, where her family lives, and may not be in the company of anyone under the age of 16. At the family's request, she was prohibited from visiting John's grave. Ashfield will be released from jail sometime between August 12 and 19, 2011. On August 15, 2011, Ashfield, who has changed her name to Angelica Karstrom, walked out of the Windsor John Moroney prison complex this morning after serving 18 years in jail for murdering her little boy, John Ashfield, in 1993. Karstrom, who was wearing a black trouser suit and a white collared shirt, did not speak to media as she was escorted to a waiting vehicle by police. Dressed in black boots, black pants, and a black jacket over a white shirt, she walked straight from the prison with her head down, ignoring the media and refusing to comment. Escorted by 2 probation and parole officers, Karstrom was taken to a secret corrective services approved residential facility, where she will live for the next 12 months. All she had with her was a blue garbage bag of belongings, with not one member of her family arriving at the jail to greet her after 18 years of jail. A corrective services spokeswoman said she would be heavily monitored over the next year. Karstrom will have her anklet calibrated this afternoon, before she settles into her new place. The 43-year-old then will be subject to strict parole conditions, including electronic monitoring, drug and alcohol testing, and have a curfew. Ashfield has also been prohibited from seeing Hughes, who was released from jail in 2009. The parole board announced in June Ashfield was to be freed 1 year ahead of her release date. If Ashfield had served her full 19 years, there would have been no way of imposing parole conditions, and authorities would not have been able to know her whereabouts or monitor her behavior.